Can I go? Okay, welcome everyone. Whoever is outside wants to come in should come in. No, the door is being shut. Okay, I'm Jeromin Zettelmeyer. I'm the director of Bruegel, and I'm extremely excited to have with me my former boss, Kristalina Georgieva, who I still regularly interact with because she was kind enough to make me a member of her academic advisory council, which always leads to great debates every few months. And we are here to talk about a variety of topics related to the global economy, making use of the fact that the managing director, who of course needs no introduction, she's the managing director of the IMF, she was previously the CEO of the World Bank, and before that, executive vice president of the European Commission. We saw each other at Davos last week. I listened to you in the public global economic outlook session. I know you had other closed-door sessions, interesting sessions about related topics. And so, Managing Director, thank you so much that you came through Brussels on your way back to Washington and to Bruegel. And so, if you like, why don't you start by giving us a little bit of the sense of what you told global leaders in Davos.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. A very good afternoon to everybody. Great to be in Brussels. And very nice to visit you in your workplace. So I can say we let him go for the bigger European good. So we went to Davos this year with a freshly updated global outlook. And the message we brought in one sentence was, the world economy is resilient, but you should not take this resilience for granted. When we presented our results, three things stood up. First, the fact that we have upgraded our projections for a vast number of economies. We upgraded US, we upgraded Eurozone, China, India, practically all regions, with the exception as a region of Latin America. So universally, the world has managed the many factors of uncertainty reasonably well. The second thing that stood up was that while we have upgraded our projection, growth still remains below the historic averages from before the pandemic, but somehow this is no more bothering people as much I think it should bother them. And the third thing that stood up was the reasons why growth is resilient and how some reasons are recognized and debated and some are not. So what did we see in when we look under the hood of this more resilient global growth? We basically see one, the fact that private sector is more agile and that in majority of the world, including with the support of the fund, governments pulled out from running the economy where they don't belong, and that is now creating an environment for faster adaptability. The second reason is that trade was a much less significant factor for global growth in 25 and likely to be less significant in 26 because the US announced 23% tariffs globally, but in fact they went down and then the effective tariffs were below the nominal. But most importantly, the rest of the world said, thank you, but no thank you, we continue to trade. For now. Again, don't take this for granted. So these two things are recognized. So is the massive investment in AI, a driver of optimism. But there is a fourth factor, and it is less recognized, and that does concern me, and it should concern you. And that is the role of good policies and strong institutions. Because when we look at the world, again, we have seen fiscal councils, we have seen in inflation targeting, we have seen good debt management in quite a number of countries, not everywhere. We have seen independent central banks. They play a role for this resilience, but they're given very little attention, and the result may be that we erode that factor of strength. We brought also to Davos some new research we have done on the role of artificial intelligence for labor markets. And that actually picked up a lot of interest. So what have we concluded so far? One, the impact of artificial intelligence on labor markets across the world is quite significant, most significant in advanced economies where we expect over a couple of years 60% of jobs to be transformed or eliminated or upgraded significantly, 40% in emerging markets, 26% in low-income countries. This is like a tsunami hitting the labor market, and I don't think we're ready for it. But then we looked further. Is there impact on productivity? So one piece of analysis says, yeah, there would be an increase in productivity and therefore in growth, somewhere between 0.1 and 0.8%. 0.8% is big. It will lift global growth above pre-pandemic levels if it happens. And then we looked at micro level what is happening. In advanced economies, already 1 in 10 jobs is requiring additional AI-related skills, 1 or 2 or 3, and is paying better. Because it is paying better, those people with more money in their pockets go and buy restaurant services, tourism, sports, entertainment, and the demand at local level for low-skilled jobs goes up. And in fact, in the research we did, the total impact on employment is positive, although it is positive because of the increase of demand for low-skilled workers. But those jobs in the middle that are not transformed, they pay less. And most significantly, the tasks that get eliminated are usually tasks that formulate first entrance jobs. In other words, young people coming to the job market now find it more difficult to find jobs. So when we looked at this picture, our conclusion is artificial intelligence is moving, of course, much faster than we anticipated even a couple of years ago, and yet there is no regulatory framework that is globally accepted. There are no ways to protect from negative impact society. In other words, guardrails are missing. And here is where I want to finish. We are in Davos. One, we have everybody saying, oh, the IMF upgraded the projections for global growth. Everything is honky-dory. And then no conversation whatsoever about the guardrails, the way we are going as societies to rely on artificial intelligence that should have taken place. Why didn't it take place? Among other things, because there were conversations on other topics. So what should have happened didn't happen, and what maybe should have not happened happened.
Maybe just a quick follow-up on the last set of issues. Are you mostly concerned about the lack of regulatory frameworks for AI development itself, except in Europe, where, of course, it's been controversial? The Commission has walked it back a little bit. Or are you mainly concerned about the inability of labor market institutions to handle AI-related labor market shocks?
We are mostly concerned about the very serious risks of two things happening. The accordion of opportunities domestically and globally opening very widely and creating inequality pressures on societies. And second, AI generating deep fakes and basically evil stuff. And there is nothing today that gives us comfort that this is going to be handled.
Right. And so the first of these issues has to do with institutions more broadly, redistribution, welfare state, education, which just may not be up to scratch. The second one with regulation of AI directly. Maybe going back to the first points that you made, so you went through, I think a very convincing list of why the world economy has been resilient. So at least 3 points. The trade shock wasn't as bad as it might have been. AI investment driving things up. And finally, institutions working, right? Now, if you look through that list, it could also make you a little bit nervous because it basically gives you a guide to how things could go wrong, right? So the trade war could come back in a bigger way. The AI bubble might burst, and institutions are under attack and might not make it, particularly as we know, central bank institutions, particularly in the United States. Which one of these makes you particularly nervous? So if you are sort of thinking about the limits to resilience, what are you mainly worried about?
Well, I worry about this fourth factor, policies and institutions, because if we don't value it, we are not going to protect it. And if you look at the history of actually humanity, the history of the last centuries, what it tells you that a country from poor becomes rich in the absence of natural resources by investing in education, infrastructure, and rule of law. Now, you lose rule of law, you then risk to undermine the functioning of the economy, and this is something that we have to do. You're doing a lot of work. We probably should do even more work to demonstrate why this matters for businesses and households. I am also very concerned that we are not yet fully recognizing how much the world has changed. That we are now at the point when we genuinely have to build a muscle to face the unthinkable and handle it when it happens. Stay calm, composed, and then act accordingly. When people talk about the world, the new world, they miss a very important ingredient, which is we know what the old world was. We don't really know where we are going to land in this transformation because it is simultaneously 4 transformations are going on: geopolitical, technological, demographic, and climate. And that makes that combination of factors requires a agile policy making, institutions that are capable of quickly changing gear and reprioritizing. And I look at our institutions and they're built for the world we used to have. Including for us at the fund, by the way. I can tell you at the fund, you know that, one muscle that we are building is our ability to hypothetically present scenarios of unthinkable events and then figure out what do we do. And I feel we have to do even more of that, and you know that we do this early warning exercise. We have to do more for our membership.
Absolutely. So I want to stay with global topics just a little more and then eventually take you to Europe. So one shoe that doesn't seem to have dropped, at least not drastically, is financial fragmentation, which the fund sort of warned about and wrote about quite early. So we have had, obviously, a fair amount of trade disruptions, not as bad as could have been, but not much in the financial arena. Are you concerned about this, and what could trigger it? So I'm concerned for two reasons. Maybe you can comment on those. One is that, of course, what we are also seeing in several economies is a topic which you have emphasized a lot, high debt and fiscal pressures, combined with maybe not so great growth. And so situations like these could lead policymakers to go for some version of financial repression, inflation as a solution that could in turn lead to fragmentation. And then, of course, we have the big geopolitical fissures in the world economy. So are we sort of out of the woods as far as financial fragmentation is concerned, or have we not seen it yet?
Okay, so let me first start with your analogy about the shoes. Yes. And say for the fund we look at macroeconomic financial stability, growth, and at this point of time we have both shoes on our feet. Growth is okay, and financial stability is okay. Now, from here, can we get to a place where we are shoeless? And yeah, we could. On the financial stability front, I would say this. Again, it is a product of conscious action after the global financial crisis that the banking system globally has been strengthened, and we are reaping we have the benefits of it today. It is also true that we have developed measurements on financial stability with the Financial Stability Board, an institution like BIS, an institution like the fund, central banks. We are watching this quite carefully, and when there are early warning signals, there is a menu of actions, recommended actions, and actions are being taken. But what we see from the fund are two very significant forces that can destabilize this. The first one is what is happening in terms of non-bank financial institutions, and the fact that they have grown to now provide more than 50% of finances to the world. So they are not regulated the same way banks are regulated, and yet they're very significant. Nothing bad has happened so far, but the shoe may drop. And the second one is what is happening in terms of stable coins. It is very significant that we now have in the US legislation that places US dollar-backed stable coins in a position of potentially competitive strength. What that means is that we may see a world in which many countries find themselves somewhat losing monetary policy sovereignty, and quite a number of our member states are worried about it. And then we also see countries coming up with stable coins of their own, and then we may be in a place where financial system fragmentation comes from the kind of digital angle. We have a very practical question. Are we seeing stretched valuations to a point they can create a financial crisis? Not yet. And actually on the high debt side, so far, we don't see this to be a risk for a systemic crisis. Doesn't mean that it may not turn into one if we have a drop in global growth or growth in regions combined with more wars, more natural disasters. We may be in a different place, but so far, this is not our biggest worry. Now, if I were to draw a line under this, what I'm saying, and connect fiscal and financial positioning, yes, you are absolutely right. On the fiscal front, we see not only that public debt is going up, soon to exceed 100% of GDP, but that countries are very reluctant to go with fiscal consolidation. As we all know, it is very easy to put in place stimulus, very tough to pull back. Could that become a big problem? Yes, if we see trade wars picking up, tariffs driving inflation, inflation pushing interest rates again up, then we may be in trouble. Not the picture at this point, but again, don't take what we have for granted. And don't forget that the only way countries can protect themselves in a time of uncertainty, get your own house in order, be as strong as you can be, including on the fiscal side.
Thank you. So there is a sort of benign version of financial fragmentation, which people sometimes refer to as multipolarity. So a situation where, there's not a crisis, financial integration may continue, but the US dollar is no longer the unrivaled international financial currency. The euro might grow as a reserve currency and as a currency of denomination of financial transactions. And, there's policymakers in Europe, including in the euro system, that kind of like this scenario. There is also a view that it may be less efficient than the current system, and that when you have, several currencies competing, you can have instability as a result of, runs from one currency to the other. What are the IMF's views on this?
At the IMF, let me start by saying we are in a multipolar world. This is not the future. The future has arrived. And it has been kind of slowly coming to life over the last years. We have seen that over time, because there are multiple sources of global growth, that leads to more trust in the currencies of mid-size, well-performing countries, the Swedish krona, the Swiss franc, the Australian dollar. And of course, the Eurozone has put a significant source of reserves for many countries. The picture has been changing. We have seen the dollar being 72% of global reserves at its peak to now being around 57%. And it is very light, by the way, not because of the yuan, but because of the mid-sized currencies that are attractive for diversifying portfolios. And of course, what we see most recently is, where do people go? For gold. And that is an indication that there is a bit of concern around financial fragmentation. And yet, if you look at the dollar, it remains a dominant currency for one reason, and one reason only: the depth and liquidity of capital markets in the United States, the size of the economy. So as long as this factor is so clearly there, it is hard to expect some dramatic shift to take place. Also, when you look at financial flows, where money goes, including savings of the European people, it is a destination that for now is dominant towards the United States, 75% of financial flows. So that is where we are. The world is changing. Multipolarity means more diversification of currencies holding. But the change absolutely is not dramatic. Actually, when we looked at the last couple of years, it is more exchange rate changes than actual changes in who holds what.
I mean, arguably, like you suggested, I think the fact that there has been this flight into gold suggests a problem, right? It's actually two problems. One is, why are people hedging against a US dollar depreciation? The other one is, why are they not going to the euro? One of the reasons, as you, I think, also suggested, is that we don't have a ton of liquid, homogeneous, euro-denominated debt out there. Now, the fund has long argued for a common fiscal capacity in the euro area, which would be the counterpart of common EU debt. Do you think that this is a strong additional reason for common EU debt issuance, euro debt issuance?
I am a big proponent of the EU building and the Eurozone building competitive strength. And I believe that if there is more attention to how Europe finances European public goods together, that would solve two problems. One, it would provide more efficient use of the taxpayer money, bring more value to the European people, and two, it would create what there is appetite for, a bigger offer of European paper that people can buy and hold and enjoy. But it is a very difficult conversation in Europe to move in this direction. I do hope that you guys are going to be pressing for it, because if 10 years ago, when I first came, actually, let me say this. When I came to Europe as the accidental commissioner in 2010, the European economy was bigger than the economy of the United States. Where are we today? The European economy is smaller than the economy of the United States. And why is that so? Because productivity in Europe is lagging, and it continues to lag. Now, do we want a dynamic Europe? Yes, we do. Are we willing to do what it takes to get there? We shall see.
A great moment to actually switch a little bit to Europe. So, one problem, maybe the cardinal problem that we are facing, is that Europe's industrial model is under pressure for several reasons: high energy costs, the fact that we are going further in carbon pricing than other competitors, and of course overcapacity in China. So it's clear we are going to have to adapt. On the other hand, for the same reasons, we have a lot of pressure for slowing the process of adaptation, because there's a worry that if we adapt too fast, too quickly, everything will break down. We're going to have a big social problem. So there is a high demand for protection. And I have the feeling that European policymakers haven't quite figured out how to reconcile these two things. No, we really need structural transformation, but at the same time, there's this clamor for subsidies, tariffs, local content requirements by European. And the European Commission actually is among those that are clamoring for these things. How do you reconcile this need for structural change with the imperative of making it orderly, but without actually, preventing it?
I want to start first by recognizing how good Europe is, because we are now very easy to slide quickly into criticizing Europe. And of course, we need to demand from Europe, because otherwise it's not going to change. But having sat in Davos and having listened to quite a lot of the conversation being tilted towards only the second part, Let me say two things about Europe that Europeans cherish, and rightly so, and they should watch over not to lose them. The first one is the fact that Europe has overcome fairly complicated crises, retaining solidarity, and the most painful one in recent memory is the Eurozone crisis. And the countries that went through painful adjustment, including with participation from the fund, like Portugal, Greece, Ireland, Iceland, they now outperform the rest of Europe. If you look at OECD ranking for 2025 on a comprehensive basis, in other words, growth, inflation, markets, number one country is, let me see how much you read The Economist. Which is the number one country for 2025? Portugal. Number two, Ireland. Number four, Spain. They didn't go through the same adjustment, but actually they did have some adjustment to make. Number six, Greece. And then we have three countries that are not in the Eurozone, Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Poland. So out of 10, 7 are European countries. So we have to remember that European countries do go for reforms. Unfortunately, more often than not, when there is no other way, your back is to the wall, and they are successful. And the second thing I want to say about Europe is that when the war in Ukraine started, not only Europe took the right side, but in a fairly effective and fast manner, it freed itself from dependency, by and large, from dependency on Russian gas. In other words, again, when faced with a genuine crisis, Europe is able to act. Our problem today is that Europe is faced with a genuine crisis, but it comes in a drip, 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 drip way. And for this reason, I believe it is really hard for Europe to get its act together. It is a crisis of competitiveness, and not at all a minor problem for Europe. So when we look at the way Europe currently is addressing this crisis of competitiveness, the positive is that the diagnostics is done. We know what the problem is, we know what needs to be done. The not so positive is that there is a long way for the doing to happen. And it is the Commission and it is the member states. Today a journalist asked me a very interesting question. And the question was provocative. Should Europe take a page from Milei's reform book in Argentina, more specifically on doing drastic reforms fast? So my answer to this was, yeah, there is something Argentina is doing which is quite remarkable, getting their fiscal house in order, and obviously not the same magnitude, but it's a problem here. And then I remembered a very nice saying in Argentina: it takes two to tango. Well, in Europe, it takes 27. How do you tango in a situation like this? We have been very clear at the fund that if Europe continues to lack in productivity and growth, what it would ultimately lead to is erosion of the social compact in Europe. Europe simply could not afford to provide education and healthcare and public services the way it has been doing it for decades. And I don't think that politicians in Europe have the guts to say to their people straight in their face, we have to do it, or otherwise we will be poor and irrelevant. Not immediately, but this is going to come. And then act on the priorities. My colleagues at the fund have been working with our European friends. We came up with 4 priorities that we think are essential. We now see the Commission pretty much going exactly in that same direction: the 28 regime for firms, the banking and the saving and investment union, the energy system for the whole of Europe, and ability of labor to move across with qualifications. So I think at this point of European history, ability to focus single-mindedly on the single market is paramount for Europe's standing. I have had many conversations with people who would say, yeah, that's true, very much agree, but it cannot be done because of this, because of that. And I think we need a massive injection of that same sense of urgency that we had during the Eurozone crisis today.
Yeah. So I agree with you, Managing Director, that there are, at least 2/3 of the productivity agenda is measures which we know, and there's general agreement on what to do and how to do them, but they tend to run into, parochial domestic constraints, or, politicians worry about re-election, things like that. But there's one point, at least, where there's, truly confusion and disagreement in the policy-making world in Europe, and that's the future role of trade and rules-based trade. So do you have a message on that? I mean, essentially we have 2 extreme views. One is, everyone's doing economic nationalism these days, so let's also do it as long as it's at the EU level, not within the EU. So, local content and discriminatory tariffs should be fair game. We should be revising the most favored nation clause principle, for example. And the other view is the view that, rules-based trade has been a foundation for European prosperity. And like you said, that trade is still going on, by and large, in spite of the actions of the Americans. By and large, WTO, MFN tariffs are being respected, and so there's a concern that if we go ahead and upset the apple cart, that's going to make a real difference. So where do you come out?
I mean, I would lean more in the second direction. Europe is recognized as a leader for an integrated and fair global economy. It has earned it over decades. Losing that standing would make it more difficult in a rapidly changing world for Europe to exercise leadership, to be a center of attraction for other countries. This being said, we have never at the fund completely nixed use of industrial policy. There could be justification, but it has to be temporary. It has to be clear how we get in, how we get out. We also recognize that if Europe is tariffed by other countries, it can only take that so far. So if we have a tit-for-tat world, very difficult to say, you kind of...
Yes, turn the other cheek.
Exactly. But I think that if you step back and say, what would happen if Europe was to choose to go for industrial policy and domestic content, I guarantee you that this would become the attraction for many other countries. They would go that way, they would go further, they would go faster. And these are guys we want to trade with. So it's sort of...
Yes.
Looks like, where is my gun, where is my foot?
Exactly.
If you choose that course of action.
I think that's a really important messages. I hope the commissioners are listening. Maybe just, I want to make one point on, or ask you one question on climate, because I know that climate is very close to your heart. You are an environmental economist. You were not the first, but the second managing director after Christine Lagarde to really push climate. I was very privileged to work for you on climate-related issues. I think it is actually quite easy to reconcile climate action within the mandate of the fund, because the mandate of the fund is about crisis prevention, and this is the most ominous crisis that we all face. But we know that we are in a political environment that is not easy. So to illustrate, the World Economic Forum asked me to write this tiny little piece where we're supposed to identify the big paradoxes in the global economy, and I said that the biggest paradox remains the fact that we need global cooperation more than ever to solve the climate crisis, just at a time when global cooperation is diminishing. So how do you address this challenge at the fund today?
I can say at the fund we were fortunate. We did a lot of policy research and sort of setting the course for what does it mean for the fund to recognize that climate risks are macro-critical, and that a transformation of an economy to adapt to the world of changing climate does require for us to understand what are the consequences and how we can address them. So we did this, and now we can say we have pretty much brought this into the bread and butter work of the fund. It is indeed time of more controversy around something that, frankly shouldn't be controversial, but it is. And what we do is we do our work. Again, we are very fortunate to have the tools already in our hands, and we apply these tools prudently. Obviously, if in a country the biggest problem is not related to climate, we should not force it in our analysis and the policy recommendations we make.
Absolutely. So I want to end with a question on Ukraine, and then we can maybe ask for the floor to come in. So I remember when I was, for Europe, obviously, and arguably for the world that believes in the rule of law, the Ukraine war is really existential. I remember how difficult it was for us at the IMF when I was back there. So I'm thinking about the spring of 22, immediately after the Russian invasion, to decide on what role the fund should be playing, right? And it was difficult because, let's face it, this is a war is not a problem that can be ideally addressed with the instruments of the IMF. The instruments of the IMF include lending, but lending is supposed to solve medium-term problems that can be addressed through good macro policies, and then they pay back, and of course there are huge risks associated. And last not least, the fund is a multilateral institution. It's not supposed to take sides in a conflict between two members. Can you maybe briefly describe, in the end, where the fund came out and how it was able to overcome these sort of internal barriers?
But the short answer is by adapting our policies to the world we operate in. And clearly we have exceptional uncertainty in Ukraine, but we also have a government that is committed to reforms and very disciplined in carrying these reforms. I tell everybody, Ukraine earned every penny it has received from the fund and from its friends. Ukraine at one point collected 36% tax to GDP. I think it is slightly less now, but not by much. How many countries have 36% tax to GDP that are not in a war? Secondly, we created a mechanism to capture the backing of Ukraine by other members of the fund. In other words, we are not putting the resources of the fund at risk because the friends of Ukraine take that risk on their shoulders. We have had since then 8 reviews of the program for Ukraine. Not a single one had anybody, with the exception of Russia, even abstaining because the country's track record is so strong. So we have only Russia objecting, everybody else in our membership supporting the IMF role in Ukraine. If there is any question about this role, it is about us doing the same thing in other countries when the circumstances are similar. In other words, even-handedness. And I do agree this is very important for our credibility.
Thank you, Managing Director. So let's open for a few questions. By the way, you can also ask them through Slido, and the Slido code is #IMF. So we will go with the gentleman over here, the gentleman in the back, and in the front. Can you please identify yourselves?
Thanks. Christian Guimers.
And be brief, please.
Triffin think tank, University of Louvain-la-Neuve. I have just one question. What would be your reaction about our proposal to face the threat of the dollar stablecoin by issuing a private SDR stablecoin? And if public authorities would join, this could become the best safe asset the international monetary system needs. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, gentleman in the middle over there, in the back. Exactly, with the glasses.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alejandro Ferido. I work for the conference board here in Brussels. My question is about how the IMF sees external balances and whether that's changed in recent years. And what I mean by that is export-led growth was sort of the mantra, that's good for everyone, but now with economic security considerations and the need for strong internal markets, I think that's being recognized more. And I'm wondering if that's reshaping your thinking around these issues and the advice you give to countries.
Maybe Kristalina, you could take it together with the question that's on the screen, which incidentally comes from Maria de Mertzis, who is also at the conference board. Please.
Good afternoon, Jorge Valero with Bloomberg here. On the Ukraine package, the 90 billion euros from the EU side, if you could confirm that this actually helps to unlock the program, the IMF program, the latest program. And secondly, for the first time, the EU is going to finance this with joint borrowing, but for the first time without a specific date to pay back the principal. So if you think that this is actually, we're crossing a line towards having this fiscal capacity.
I'm going to take just a couple more. This is a very male. Okay, Rebecca, please. You're back in the back, and then I will give the rest a chance.
Thank you. I have to say, addressing a female head of the IMF does sort of sweeten the experience of being fourth or fifth in line. Sorry, that was a reference to a different event that none of you guys were at. I wanted to ask about gold. The role of gold in the economy, it's all over the headlines. What do you think is an appropriate role for this right now and in general?
Okay, let's give it to Nicolas in the back and then back to the front row, and then we are done. Nicolas, introduce yourself.
Nicolas Veron at Bruegel. You encouraged us, Managing Director, to think the unthinkable. So my question is, you referred to the gradual diversification of assets away from the dollar, but is the IMF working on a scenario in which that trend would become accelerated and possibly disorderly? Thank you.
Okay, so essentially a run on the dollar, a crisis, and the final question for Kurt in the first row. Make it quick, Kurt, please, and identify yourself.
Kurt Geisert, I'm one of the guides in the House of European History. I had students from New York 2 weeks ago. I said to them, even if we do not always trust President Trump, you mentioned trade war, we should try to cooperate and to avoid escalation. Do you agree?
Okay, that was done. I promised you 3, now we have 6, but they were all quite brief, and I have written them down for you. So
I took them down too. Very good question. So on the SDR question, we have a periodic review on whether SDR allocation is necessary. The last time we did it, we did not identify gap. So we did 650 billion SDR allocation in 2021. At that point, we identified there was need for additional reserves. We used our capacity to allocate SDRs. Then we did another review that did not show that kind of lack of reserve capacity that would justify for the fund to come up with a new SDR allocation. So before we are to go into stablecoin SDR, we need to be sure that there is lack of reserves that the fund has to fill. It is a topic, digital SDR is a topic that is on the list of topics at the fund, but it is in comparison to many other issues we are wrestling with, it is not at the top of the list. In external imbalances, they were going down and then they started growing up again. And as a result, our attention on external imbalances has increased. What we see is the need to very clearly identify when these external imbalances are excessive and then recommend policies, corrective policies to the countries where that is the case. And yes, we look at external imbalances both on the plus, in other words, surpluses, and on the minus deficits side, so that goes into the current account question. What we have done is to, actually what we are doing right now, is to update the methodology for our external sector report, and it is helping us to get more calibrated answer on the question what should be done with regard to imbalances. When we look at imbalances, there are 3 areas in the world where definitely there is need for attention, and then we turn this into our country level Article 4 consultations. China, where we have an economy that is export oriented and needs to shift gear towards domestic consumption, and we have given China very detailed recommendations around what they can do to move in this way. I was relieved to hear from the Chinese leadership when I was in China last that they recognize they need to take that turn. And the question is not whether they are committed to take the turn. The question is how easy it would be to take the turn. Because they have a nation of savers, they need to take them into consumers. And that is not an easy task. We have on the other side the opposite, a nation of consumers that need to become more of a nation of savers. And again, we engage with the US on the question of how they can reduce the deficit, what steps they can take in that regard. And here in Europe, what we have seen in the case of Germany is a step towards correcting an imbalance. And of course, we are very positive about Germany taking this step. So it's a big part of our work. The interest in it is getting higher and higher. And as a result, we called, you would be interested to know, we actually looked around all the departments of the fund. Where do we have people who understand this topic inside out to bring them to work on it? On the question about Ukraine, absolutely we take into account the EU coming up with the 90 billion euros for Ukraine. I want to thank each and every one of the Europeans, not only the policymakers, but the people of Europe for making that possible. Without it, we cannot have a program. Without a program, it is very difficult to retain the economy of Ukraine functional. So it's a very, very important step. We think that the way the borrowing has been structured reflects objective realities. So in this sense, we are not, and let me say something else. We have food trust in Europe. Europe is rich. It is still a very wealthy place. And it sure can mobilize through borrowing 90 billion and then structure the way potentially the servicing of this 90 billion would be done. Gold. Okay, let me start by saying that as an institution that is my members, our members are gold holders. We have seen our reserve position improving dramatically over time. When you left the fund, I think our gold was worth about 130 billion. I was trying to calculate. It is now over 300 billion worth. So what it tells you is that at the time of uncertainty, there is a tendency for countries, businesses, individuals to lean on the known. And gold has been known for centuries to be a store of value that you can rely on. It's relatively easy to move around. And I think that when I say uncertainty is the new normal, I think the price of gold makes this point quite strongly. Where it is going to end, which direction it's gonna go. For now, it has been going up. Let me ask you a question. Do you see an end of uncertainty? Yes? No? How many of you would say, yes, it'll come, end of the uncertainty would come? Nobody. So, buckle up. On the next question is about the risk. Are we running scenarios? We run all kinds of scenarios at the fund. And I can tell you that we are looking at this problem the way I described it when I was talking about it. This is where we are on it. And then we had the last question on
cooperation. Effectively, the concern that Europe might be, in a way, overreacting, right, to the hostility of the administration in the US, and whether you see a case
my
for
apologies. Yes, I scrambled something here. So I think that keeping calm, staying calm, is a prerequisite for operating in uncertainty and in a very turbulent world. So yeah, it is much better to not allow emotions to impact your decision making, and think what is best for the world, what is best for your people, and certainly a world in which we avoid trade wars and confrontations is better for everybody. It takes maturity of judgment, and it also takes the ability to remain sort of impartial and non-emotional in the world we are in. It's not an easy thing to do, though. So obviously we have to prepare that there could be some decisions taken in the heat of the moment. The fewer they are, the better off the world would be. Mm-hmm. And I see swap agreement with Fed could be at risk because President.
Yes, if you would like to address.
Yeah. So
that.
I would say this: there is ample evidence that central bank independence is good for businesses, and it is good for households, for consumers. So in that sense, it's good for decision making, and we think I'm a firm believer that recognition of the value of independent central banks, by and large, enjoys supports in all societies.
Managing Director, thank you so much for the conversation, but also for continuing to fight the good fight. And good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.